Hello and good morning, everyone. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. I should say that I miss you all. Usually, on such an occasion, we come together early in the morning and we celebrate the Easter dawn service together. We enter the dark and empty church with candle lights. And we sing together, Christ is risen. We turn on all the lights and we celebrate with joy and gladness. Unfortunately, because of the current pandemic, it's not possible at this stage, but it should not stop our joyful celebration of this occasion. Today, I invite you to journey with the story of the Gospels, with the story of Jesus' resurrection as recorded in the Gospel of John. It's a very familiar story of Mary Magdalene going to the tomb and finding it empty. But before I go ahead, I invite you to pray with me. Our loving and gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Amen. Today's story, as it is recorded in the Gospel of John, is the story of a seeking woman who is surprised by what she finds when she arrives at the tomb of Jesus. Following Jesus' death, his followers have been scattered. They were in shock and in hiding. If crucifixion was meant to destroy both body and identity, apparently it was successful. Jesus was dead and his community scattered. But on Sunday, early in the morning, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb. Perhaps she wants to grieve as close as possible to the dead body of Jesus. His heart is heavy, and she only desires a place for solace. Everything's up in the air. It feels like it's forever. There is no prospect of joy and a happy community any longer. She goes there when it's still dark, and suddenly she sees the stone was removed. She goes and she calls Peter and John. They come, they get into the tomb and find it empty. Then those two disciples went back to where they were staying. But Mary stayed there, crying and weeping. She can't just let it go. She wants to understand what has happened to the body of Jesus. On this Easter Sunday, millions of people all over the world are trying, like Mary, to make sense of the current situation, the coronavirus pandemic, and the fear of death and sickness, long periods of self-isolation and quarantine, the economic meltdown, and political instability. Mary is trying to find Jesus, but even better, it is Jesus who finds her. Jesus asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Mary is so obsessed with the search for the dead body of Jesus that she thinks he is the gardener. She said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." As soon as Jesus calls her by name, she turns away and cries out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Then Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." During the centuries, many Christians have been trying hard to understand what Jesus meant when he stopped Mary from clinging to him and said, "Do not hold on to me." But is it possible to say that Jesus was practicing social distancing? That might be a new interpretation and convince many Christians who do not observe social distancing to do so. Well, don't take that last bit very seriously. I don't want to be known as a heresy maker. But oftentimes we talk about Jesus' words and we miss Mary's action and the fact that she wanted to embrace Jesus and hold on to him. More and more people around the world are practicing social distancing to stop the spread of coronavirus. It is something good and necessary. In fact, that's the most effective way to stop the fast spread of this deadly virus. But as more people are staying longer inside their houses and separated from friends and family members, they are gradually starting to feel the effects of a lack of human touch. This human touch can be handshaking, hugging, a pat on the shoulder, and so on. For many who are on their own during the self-isolation and have no physical contact, loneliness and social isolation is a growing concern. Valentina and I have a lovely friend who works in a nursing home, and she was telling, as the nursing home staff have become more and more cautious to minimize physical contact with the residents, those under their care are feeling distressed, anxious and lonely. Many of them can't make sense of what is happening, as to them everything inside the nursing home is as usual, except that meaningful human touch. In a recent Time magazine article, a professor of psychology beautifully says that touch is the fundamental language of connection. She adds that touch deprivation can impact people on a psychological and even physical level. So maintaining a good degree of positive and friendly touch, like hugging or linking arms with a friend, can calm down stress and boost immunity. I recently heard from one of our parishioners that she was in the garden and she hugged the tree, and it was a heavenly moment for her. It seems that coronavirus was a wake-up call for all of us to appreciate the simple things that we took for granted, including handshaking and a friendly hug. These acts of personal contact remind us that we are in touch and interconnected. But on this Easter morning, coronavirus is also asking us an important question. Are we in touch with Jesus? In the darkness of early mornings, do we search Him? And when He calls us by name, do we recognize His voice? And like Mary, do we want to cling to Him? It's really fascinating that in our gospel reading, as soon as Peter and John looked into the tomb and found it empty, they went back to where they were staying. But Mary didn't go with them, and instead she stayed there until she was called. This pandemic is giving the whole humanity a chance to stop, cry, and contemplate. The resurrection of Jesus is the hope that sustains this broken world. It's a sign that evil and death will not triumph, but love, grace, generosity, and non-violence will. We're called not just to the proclamation of Jesus' resurrection, but to its practice. Practicing resurrection is following the trajectory that Jesus left for us to follow. Mary went to Jesus' tomb, and from that tomb she went forth as an agent of resurrection. She was fearful, sad, her heart was broken, but she waited. And suddenly she heard the voice of Jesus calling her into a new life, the life of hope and resurrection. Thus, on Easter, we celebrate Christ's resurrection as something that happened and it still happens to us. The resurrection is the gift of persistent love that is stronger than death. Let's together, and in the name of Jesus, during this pandemic that has conquered the world with fear, let's provide a wonderful gift to all, the gift of love, the gift of resurrection. Let's together, hand in hand, practice the resurrection of Jesus in our homes, in our workplaces, in a society, and in a world that is perplexed and confused. May all of us, by walking in the footsteps of Jesus, bring the light of love and life into the broken world. Amen.